Welcome to another episode of Sounds Like a HR Problem. This is episode 10 here with Ashley and myself, Yang. And today we're doing part two of the four-part hiring and development series. And today is going to be about hiring smart. So last week we talked about mastering the interview and really focused on the candidate side and securing a job and interviewing and everything like that. Now today we're going to be talking about from the other side, from the client side. How do you hire smart? How do you hire effectively? What are some of the kind of the rules around it from a law perspective or legal perspective, and some pitfalls to make sure you don't get yourself caught in, things of that nature. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of talk about before we get started?
No, yeah, I was just gonna say, we got to hear last week about Yang and his, interview bomb story, which we've heard a couple times on the podcast, never gets old. But, in that scenario, like I'm sure all the hire managers sitting in the room were thinking like, I mean, the first like 3 minutes, they were probably like, he's not gonna make it. He probably walked in his chucks and they were like, nope. But
Yeah,
they probably still conducted a professional interview, like regardless,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
They weren't just like, "Thank you for your time, that's all, goodbye," you know? But, I think when it comes to hiring or interviewing, everybody kind of I think managers kind of feel like they know what they're looking for in terms of skill set, right? Like in terms of technical skill. They know, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody who can accomplish XYZ." They know how to talk about KPIs. They know how to talk about the company and the culture and things like that. But I think what they don't always have in their back pocket is that skill set of like being a good interviewer. I mean, it's just like interviewing we talked about on the last segment, be interviewing as a job itself. Like you have to get good at it. You have to practice. It's the same thing on the flip side for a hiring manager. It's not something that always comes natural,
yeah,
especially for managers who, let's say, don't start out as managers, right? They're promoted within to that position. And I mean, I'll never forget probably like my first, and it was probably back in my staffing days. It had to, well,
hmm,
no, because before I even got into staffing, when I was a manager in retail, I
mm,
had to interview. I mean, the interviews are a little different, right? But one interview is like, can you stand at the front door and look cute? Thanks. And the other one is more professional. But I wasn't good at it. I mean, I kind of didn't know what I was doing, right?
yeah.
But the more you do it, the better you get, just like as a candidate.
I remember when I was managing one of the branches, I interviewed this girl who was really good actually on paper. But then I remember like partly like I was exhausted that day. I was like super tired, and then I was just so like just blah, right?
Mhm.
So she came to the interview all like warm and fuzzy, high energy, and then I'm on the other side all blah and whatever, and just kind of like interviewing her, right? And then I don't even know why, but at that time I was more of like a like a kinda the good cop, bad cop, right? Sometimes, right? So I was definitely the bad cop that day, right? And then
Yeah.
I remember, we made her an offer and she's like, I don't know if I could work for you."
Yeah.
She
Well,
just didn't
so
get the
it's like you didn't give her a fair shake because you were having a bad.
Yeah, well, it's just a terrible, like, impression that I gave of her. I gave of
Yeah,
myself to her, right?
right.
So she's like, yeah, she's pretty much in a very nice way. She's like, "Yeah, I don't wanna work for you." You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I always tell people it's the same thing. I'll tell people and we'll get to that in the next session, but about having difficult conversations with employees or performance conversations, I always tell people if you're not in the right frame of mind to reschedule,
Mm,
because and I think the same thing could apply in interviewing. Like if you're not having a good day, that's gonna come across like or could. I mean, sometimes you get better at like, putting your game face on, if you will, but it can be the difference in their experience or yours for the company, so anyway.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. But that was one of my, like, personal experiences where I really, kinda learned about, like, okay, they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them,
right.
right? But
Yeah.
just experiencing it on the other side,
Yeah.
right? because up till that point, I had never gotten turned down on an offer,
Yeah.
right? And I just remember that experience, and I was like, oh yeah, it's really important to make sure that you're selling your opportunity. You're making sure that they're interested in wanting to come work for you as well.
Yeah.
And kind of as you alluded to, it's definitely a skill to be a good interviewer, also.
Right. Well, and
Yeah,
there's I don't know if you ever heard this like term, but they say people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers.
yeah, all the time.
So as a manager, you're the first line of defense when you're interviewing. You're
Hmm.
the first person they meet. You're their only gateway into, perception of the company. So if you don't show up with your, A game, that could really even reflect negatively on the company and the culture too. Right. So
Yeah,
then that person's making a decision based on that one interaction with you, and they could think to themselves, I'm not going to work for this particular person. It may not have even been about the company,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, just to kind of set this up for today, and then the whole purpose of today's episode is just kind of that question where sometimes you hire somebody who interview amazingly, and then they completely underperform once they actually get the job, right? It's like, and then looking back, you're like, oh, I could have asked some more questions here or there to filter out these things. Maybe I didn't ask enough of the like behavioral based or situational questions, right? So those are the things that we're going to cover on our episode today. And Ashley's going to help us kind of break it down and give us some insight on what she does when she's coaching her clients and how she handles some of the trainings that she does when she trains her clients and their teams. So, okay, so let's talk about just first question off the top, right? So when a hire doesn't work out, most managers think they'll just hire again, right? But you've sat with some of the managers and you've kind of talked through them and consulted with them and then look back through their hiring practices and things like that. So what does that look like when you're sitting with your clients and helping them assess the interview process?
So, so really, and I'll just kind of start with this like key thing is that if you hire smart or hire right the first time around, hopefully the intent is that you avoid like a bad hire. You avoid an employee that you're going to have issues with later on down the road because there's cost. I mean, maybe not like tangible dollars, but time and energy that is spent on trying to performance manage an employee who isn't working out. I mean, all of us, if you've ever been a manager, you know the countless hours or time that you've sat and spent going through all the documentation around their performance, all the meetings leading up to, there's a meeting to prep for the meeting with the employee. Then there's a post meeting to debrief about what the employee said. Then do we write them up? What do we write up? All the things like countless hours are spent. So if you hire right, you avoid those issues and,
Yeah,
down the
and
line.
and,
That's
and
the point.
and there are monetary repercussions to it because it's the time of the manager that they could have been spending doing something else,
Mhm.
all the cost of admin,
Yeah.
and then cost of training. So you could factor in and then calculate the true cost
Yeah,
of
you
what it
could probably
is.
come up with a dollar amount in terms of time, right?
Yeah, yeah, but it's definitely way more expensive to have a bad
Turnover
hire.
is more expensive, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because the cost of all that, and then as you're saying, like morale and how the team feels, and all of that as well.
right. So,
So
but sorry, I got a little off
yeah,
track. Back to your question of, what do I tell my clients? Like, so I have a guide that I use and it along the same title as the podcast se as this episode, right? It's smart hiring, right? And it really is about from A to Z, what do I do? What are the best practices, right? So I think number one, you have to it's that preparation that you put in before you ever walk in the room. You definitely need to have, I mean, use the job description. I always tell people use the job description as your interviewing tool, right? But that being said, the job description needs to be complete. It needs to be accurate. I mean, before you ever, we could get into other topics about posting the job, but either way, you've already posted the job, the person's in the door, right? I think it's more about there's key things you want on that job description so that the expectations of that job are very clear, right? And we'll talk a little bit more. I'm going to break that down in our episode on manager training, get a little bit more myopic on that, but essentially job description, right? Then the second thing that you really need to do is make sure that you know what questions you're going in asking and that there's some kind of structure or cadence to that interview. So for one, if you are trying to wing it, and I've done it before, I'm sure you're guilty of it too, you're not going to ask the exact same questions to the candidate you interviewed 2 days ago as you asked to the person sitting in front of you, right? Unless you have sort of a script or outline or you've rehearsed or something, right? You're going
Hmm.
to go off book. And then that's not great because then did you really do a fair interview, right? Because what if like you said, you think back, right? Could I have asked that question? Could I have, you know, gotten that response? Were there red flags? All those things are easier to pin down if you stay in the same structure of the interview. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing that should be going off cuff is really like side chatter. I mean, there should be conversation because if I'm an employee or a candidate that's interviewing, I would want a little bit of personality. If it's all like just questions and dry, like I start to wonder if this is the right place for me, right? So you can go off book in terms of like just conversation or examples and or storytelling, but the questions about their skill set, their resume, the job description, job responsibilities, you want to keep those as close to the center as you can. I mean, they need to be very similar candidate to candidate.
So would you recommend that everybody has like an interviewing kind of guideline or interviewing like a checklist or something of questions that they go through and they ask every candidate the same questions?
Yeah, so I tend to try to work off of like a grid, right? Or some people there's different matrix, there's different terms that there's some people call it a 9 box or a 6 box. It's really depends on how you want to term it. But what that means is that, that you have you go through. So let's say that you're trying to, in each person, you want to identify, let's say 5 key things, right? How do they communicate? How do they work in a team? How are they client or customer? I mean, not everybody's client facing, not everybody's customer centric, but that can still mean customer service as in internally as well, right? How do they interact with other departments and service to their colleagues, if you will? Um, and then you want to know things like, and then there's the technical box skill set, but it's 4 or 5 things that you're trying to basically rate that person against another person. So if you take those 5 things and you ask questions within those buckets, like, so communication, right? You start with that first grid and you say, these are the 3 or 4 questions I'm going to ask around communication. I'm going to ask those same 4 questions to the next candidate. And however their answers or responses differ is going to tell me who's the stronger candidate. Right.
Yeah.
And then so on and so forth for the other buckets. But I mean, that's generally you want to start with some kind of, and it's really especially good for panel interviewing
Mm.
because panel interviewing can be really overwhelming for the candidate, especially if people are talking over each other or like a question gets asked again that was already asked or like they jump around with their questions. If you're
Mhm.
going to do panel interviewing, that grid also says, okay, hey, Susan, you're going to tackle these questions around communication. Bill, you're going to tackle these questions around customer service. That way everybody kind of gets to participate and gets responses from the candidate, but without it being like chaos in the interview.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that
So
creates structure.
so let's kind of help, structure the thought process of it. So before we actually conduct the interview, first thing we have to do is have the job description, right?
Yeah.
So what are some common things that hiring managers do with job description that could backfire? What are some things like how does a good job description should be written versus potential like things that they could get
That's
in
so
trouble
great.
for? Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So I think one of the biggest mistakes that managers make is people, you'll see it all the time, right? And especially in I think I see it more in job postings than I do in descriptions, which by the way, those are two different things, but I'll
Yeah.
talk
So what's
about
the difference? Yeah, explain
that.
that.
So what they do wrong sometimes in a job posting is there's a lot of that fluff. What I mean by fluff is seeking someone who is outgoing, like that. There is no tangible I mean, other than they come in and they're bubbly, how are you going to know that they're outgoing with your clients? The only way to know that is to see it in action. And
Hmm.
so again, you have a very short limited window to get that information from them in the interview, right? So how do I know that? So intangibles is what I call them. You want to sort of try to get rid of some of that fluff if you can
Hmm.
in the job description, right? Because it doesn't really tell you whether they can do the job or not. But I think most companies, you throw it in AI, you throw it in, you use whatever you use to do the job description these days, it's going to still give you all that fluff. But I just am a big proponent of taking it out because I think you should have only the things that are tangible in there.
Yeah. That's
'Cause
actually a recommendation.
everyone's gonna say that they're, goal oriented.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone's gonna say that they're detail oriented,
So it's
you know?
it's kind of the same. It's kind of the similar advice that we give to candidates on their resumes is take out the fluff from your resumes, go
Yeah,
after more concrete examples or concrete skills, something that's more tangible, as you were saying. And then this is just a kind of on the flip side. So when you're looking for certain things, write down items that are really tangible, right?
right.
Like that can be measured.
Yes, so
So then,
if you're the manager looking at you're looking at the resume, not the candidate writing it. It's the same, it's just the reverse of that, where as the manager, you wanna be looking at the resume and trying to parse out quickly things that you see as those tangible items, those key
yeah,
accomplishments, those what did they do to better that in that role and for that company and whatever, right? And so
yeah.
that's the same kinda eye that you wanna have as the manager.
So then you were saying a job description versus a job posting is different. So
Yeah.
yes, what's the difference there?
So again, job description is gonna be all those tangible, like, very skill set driven things. The posting is gonna be that is where you're enticing. A job description doesn't have to entice necessarily because that is just really a legal document. I tell people all the time, job description. People are like, "Oh, I think we have a job, or we haven't updated ours in a while." And I'm like, "You need to because there's so many things that." And we'll talk about that in our next segment on the manager training. But either way, it's a legal document. You can take the fluff out of it. But a job posting, you're enticing someone to come work for you. So that's where you want to highlight all the perks, not just to the company, but of the department. What benefits am I getting? What stands out about your culture? Why is your department fun to work for, good to work for? Are there team building activities you do in your department? Whatever it is, that's your opportunity to showcase, if you will, the job. The things that are not on a job description. I mean, you're going to
Yes.
have the job duties there too, of course, because you want to be very clear with the candidate what they're walking into when they apply for the job, but you're also wanting to show them all the other things that make it special.
Yeah. So essentially, the job description is an internal document. The job posting is an external
Yeah.
document. It could
Yeah.
be document, but usually a posting, right? So, having worked inside HR, right? So usually the job description that Ashley is referring to is an internal document that lists responsibilities for that particular job. So if it's like like we'll just say like an HR manager, for example, the responsibilities are XYZ, the required skills are ABC, and that's it. So it's got very clear, identifiable skills and requirements needed to do this job. And then
And
as
that
Ashley was,
includes, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Yang. That
yeah,
includes, so when I was saying, like legal, meaning you want to include things like the physical requirements of the job,
yeah,
right? You want to include, is it an exempt? Is it non-exempt? Is it a salary? Is it an hourly? Like all those classification type things, who does it report to? What's the salary range? Like all those things should be part of that job description,
yeah.
but
So
not all those
usually,
out of the posting.
yeah,
So
so usually there's like a template, right? So it's like a template and it has like those boxes, and then you just fill in those boxes of like report to, salary, pay grade, whatever it may
yeah,
be, description, responsibilities, all that. So it's usually like an internal document that you keep for yourself. And as Ashley was saying, it's something that you want to update ideally like annually, right? Because
annually
because because responsibilities could change or
change.
evolve. Yeah, exactly. And then the job posting that Ashley's talking about is something that it's almost like your advertisement,
Yeah.
right? It's
Mhm.
so I've seen some pretty creative job postings
I have
where,
you.
yeah, where they're more like, if you're a person that likes this, this is the job for you, right? So, but that's not something that you would ever keep internally. So I
Right.
think that's kind of the difference that Ashley's trying to say between a job description versus a job posting. And, one's you're just selling versus one's a legal document internally that you're keeping.
Right. So then when they walk in the door to interview though, you want to switch that mode, right? A little bit like you can talk about some of the things on the posting, like things may come up in the interview around benefits and perks, right? I mean, I would ask if I was an employee, "Hey, I saw in your posting it said XYZ, tell me more about that."
Hmm.
But I would also say now you want to switch that gear more over to that technical. Now you want to drill in on the things that really are going to differentiate your candidates, right?
So then when you're starting out the interview, obviously they'll give you the copy of the resume or you'll already have it printed. So from a like a manager that's looking at the resume, right? And they're trying to get a feel for them. Like how should they start? Are there ways, potential things that they end up misreading the resume, or things that they should focus on the resume when they're talking about it to bring out the best in as far as like answers go with the
Right.
candidates?
Well, that's what I would also say is familiarize yourself a little bit more with the resume before you come in the door because things around like, okay, common questions, right, that people ask are tell me about, oh, so I see at your last job, you were blah, blah, blah. You were at this company, you did this. Tell me more about that, and then they elaborate. Uh, or I see that you have 5 years experience, a boring interview. Sorry if y'all do it this way, but is that one where they just go through the resume? It's like, I can't, if you've been a candidate in that interview too, you're like, okay, well, you have my resume, like, you've seen my resume, right? So yeah, I would say try to stay away from just being like, go through.
Actually, what your first point about like read the resume before, there's so many people that'll just show up to the interview because they have it, and then they'll just kind of wing it. They'll just kind of like glance it, look at it, and then they'll just kind of go from the
So they've
top.
never
Yeah,
probably seen it before. They're like, who are you? Katie. What
yeah,
position are you applying for?" Especially HR because we're not always we're doing like pre-screening or whatever, and we're like, I don't know what
yeah. Well, so,
like
so so Ashley's tip about literally take 5 to 10 minutes before the interview just to read through and then just prep.
yeah,
Just know, get a feel for what their background is, who they are, and then just kind of make notes of things that you want to like highlight or make sure we talk about this. Oh, they put a key accomplishment here. I want to talk about this. I want to hear this story, right?
right,
It just takes 5 to 10 minutes, but just that little bit of effort beforehand makes an impression. It makes a
right,
difference, and candidates can actually feel and notice if you've actually prepped or not.
prepped. Yeah, they'll know pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Even inexperienced candidates are like, I feel
Well,
like this
and then it gives
person's
them a
never
sense of
seen my
like, it gives them a sense of like, oh, they're prepared, they're interested in me, they really want to
They know a
know.
little
So
bit about my background already when I've walked in the door. Like,
yeah, so it just makes the interview feel just better, right?
Right. So I would say
Mm,
that, yeah, like, and then that way you pull out some key things out of that resume. So then yes, you want to pull out like, okay, I really like that this person had 5 years experience. I mean, it could have been a couple of jobs ago, but this is really key to what we do. This was a direct industry. They worked in a similar department. I really want to highlight some of the things and parse out some of the things from that. Right. So
yeah.
then how do I do that without just asking the question of, tell me about what you did there? Right. Or tell me more about like your time at XYZ company. Like, because they're just going to tell you what they did. They're just going to regurgitate to you their resume, essentially, right?
Hmm.
But that's not going to tell you anything about capability or
Yes.
personality
So
or
how do you find that out? Like, what's a better way to interview versus just saying, "Tell me about this" or "Tell me about that"?
so when I go into clients and I do interview training, and by the way, the training that I do is a more extensive. So what I do in those interviews is we actually role play it. I
Mm,
do I do like fake interviews and I give people cue cards where they have like a candidate and a manager, but sometimes I'll have a personality in there. This is a
mm,
really difficult candidate, right? Or this is a passive manager that doesn't really care. And
mm,
then that way, and they don't know, each other does not know, right? So then it makes for that dynamic. You can create a real world scenario and
mhm,
then, most of the time you'll watch an interviewer kind of stumble through it. And then I point out, okay, what could you do like an ask the audience, but what could they have done better? What could have been better here? But why did that go wrong? Or why did the candidate not answer the question fully? Well, because of how they asked the question. So, but normally the fundamentals of it are the STAR method, what I call the STAR method. So it's situation,
mhm,
task, action, and then response. So that's every question you have, you're looking for them to answer it in that way. But you can lead it, right? So, like, when you ask them about XYZ job or company, you can say situation is, you could set it up for them. You can tee it up for them. So I have an employee who, in my department and they were having an issue with another employee. You can give them the situation, right?
okay,
But then the response you're looking for is again, how did they handle it? What was the outcome? What are some things that they do? And if you have a nervous candidate, you can lead them through that a little bit, right?
mm,
Like, so you can give them the situation, you can let them start like responding, but then they can, you can say, okay, well, and then after that, what happened? You can lead them a little bit, but you're looking for those key responses of how they reacted and how they handled things.
yeah. So with STAR, and then are behavioral based questions under STAR, or could you structure it in a way to where you're asking specific behavioral based questions as well?
Yes. I mean, they go hand in hand, I would say. I mean, the method of star interviewing is already behavioral, right? Because they can't just answer yes and no questions in that regard. They have to give you context. You can ask specific questions though in each one of those. Like, okay, so for instance, if you give them a situation, right? And then they're like, okay, they give you a story about a time they handled that situation, then you could ask a follow-up behavioral question to say, okay, so if if that were to happen again, what would you do differently? Well, now it's not just a yes or no. They're going to have to tell you like what they learned from it,
Yeah.
you know?
And you could also ask situational questions based off of your internal company situation as
Yes, you
well.
can give them, they won't know
Mhm.
that those are real situations that you're dealing with in present time, but you absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially in HR, like, I've been in interviews where and again, HR, we have a little bit more, like, read on it. I mean, we can read between the lines a little bit, but I've been
Mhm.
asked questions where I'm like, "Oh, this isn't it." Like, I can read it as soon as it's coming out of their mouth. I'm like, "Oh, so this is an issue they're dealing with right now."
Mhm. Mhm.
You know? And
Yeah.
then I answer the question, but I'm also like, sometimes I'll elaborate and give a little more context too around like, well, without knowing the entirety of it, like this is what I would say. However, there's other options that you could explore, but it will depend on which avenue depends on findings, which
Yeah.
avenue you take, right? But you could give them an example like XYZ avenue, right? But yeah, so STAR method is really it's some people are like, oh, it's so cheesy, right? Or I hate
Yeah.
interviewing people that way. But it really, I mean, it's still a best practice in my world because I mean, I've been doing this same training for probably over 10 years. And I tweak it, right? Especially like some of the my training sessions, I'll tweak like, the hands-on aspect of it, but the content itself has stayed pretty much the same because it really works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's a
I
proven
think
methodology.
well, I think people just say it's cheesy because if you just follow the STAR and you
Oh,
ask
yeah.
it like regimented like that, then it feels like
Well, a
regimented to
candidate's
the
gonna know what you're doing. They're like,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
asking
yeah,
me
yeah.
STAR questions." Well, because
But
we
there
also tell candidates to prep that way,
yeah,
right?
to answer questions in that way as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a way to do it where you're following the steps without actually like literally following the steps, you know?
Right.
So
And you
so
can
that's
make
kind
it
of
more
why
conversational,
yeah.
but still
And
accomplish getting those things checked off, if you will.
yeah, and that's why I brought up the behavioral based interview questions because it's
Right.
pretty much the same, and you're able to figure out the situation from it, and then come to the result and what happened and all that. You just have to make sure that when you ask the question, like really assess if the candidate is just kind of skirting around it and
Yes. Yeah.
not really answering it. And if they don't, then just clear, like follow up, ask a second
Yeah.
question, and then to
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit more. If there's something in that story that you wanted to really know, but they didn't fully answer that part, just go ahead and ask a follow up question on that particular piece, right?
Right. And some other
Um,
tips I would say is okay, so besides just the methodology, right? Things about I kind of commented a little bit on panel interviewing and how to set that up or structure that to where it's not overwhelming.
mhm,
But I also think there's things around I get this question a lot from clients. How many interviews should I be doing? And how
yeah,
many is too many? And how many is too little? And how do I really know? How many people need to meet them?
yeah.
My
What do you
thing is,
say?
I think it's based on position, first of
Yeah,
all. If it's an entry level position, please do not put that person through like 4 rounds of interviews. And also, if you have a
well,
strong
uh,
manager,
unless you're like
you don't need to
uh,
meet the executive team.
unless you're like Google or something, right?
Well,
Like,
I mean, Amazon's hiring. I've had a couple of friends that have gone through their selection process.
uh
It's
huh,
wild in a good
yeah,
way. I mean, like,
yeah.
I'm not saying anything bad about Amazon. Don't come after me. I'm
Yeah,
saying
you love
that
Amazon Prime.
but it is they have I mean, obviously because they've been doing this a long time, like, they how big they are and how much hiring they do, they've really got it systematically down to a science, but it
Yeah,
is a science. They
mhm,
put people through assessments and behavioral stuff and multiple rounds of it's a rigorous process for people who've
yeah,
been through. But also, Amazon for a warehouse, let's say you're in shipping and receiving, they're not gonna put you through 5 interview rounds for that.
yeah,
But you might have 3 because you might be meeting with your immediate manager, their immediate manager. I mean, there's still gonna be some buy-in from upper management somewhere
mhm,
because they gotta
yeah,
make sure that you fit the culture. They're not just putting warm bodies in a spot, you know? But I would say for most companies, if it's an entry level, have HR if you have HR or recruiting, pre-screen them. Screen out candidates. Like, don't waste their time. Don't waste the manager's time if they're not gonna like make it. Ask those basic questions just to kind of like segment out people, right? Then, they should meet with the manager, of course, that they're going to be reporting to. I think that's very important because the personality's got to gel. And then generally, most of the time, you need your manager's buy in too or something. But
yeah,
if it's a higher level role, executive leadership's going to want to meet them. If it's somebody that's like, if I'm applying for an HR director role, I'm going to definitely be at some point in an interview with executive leadership because I'm going to be interfacing with those people. So again, they want to know that I fit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really my takeaway there
Well,
is
and then
like,
one
tell
more
me.
recommendation I would throw in there is ideally if you can lump some of those together on the same day while they're there, like
Yeah.
don't have
Even if they're
those
not
be
panel, we'll do them back to back.
yeah,
So the
well like
person
if
doesn't
you
have to
yeah,
come back a bunch of
either
times.
panel, sometimes they like to do one-on-ones, which is whatever your preference is, that's fine. But please do not have the candidate come back 5 different times to meet with
Yeah.
5 different people. It's just a very poor candidate experience. So
Yeah.
ideally, have them back to back in the same time while they're there, knock them all out if you need to. Maybe double up on some of those if you can. Instead of 4 one-on-ones back to back, maybe 2 of those can be together, 1 and then 2 of them can be one-on-one maybe.
Well, right,
But
because you have to remember these people in a lot of situations, they already have a job. So they're
yep,
trying to and they don't want their job to know. So, they're trying to sneak away during a lunch hour or they have a doctor's appointment or whatever it
yeah,
is, right? If you then there's people I know that take PTO because of and not because it's because the length of time they're like, "There's no way I can sneak out of work for this. I'm gonna have to take
yeah.
PTO."
Well, because
And
sometimes
you don't get people do that.
some of these more executive level positions, sometimes it's a 2 or 3 hour block where
Yeah,
they're
they'll tell you, "You're
meeting.
gonna be here for about 3 hours." You're like, "What?" Yeah,
Yeah, and then especially some of the technical positions, they'll do a technical interview as well,
mhm,
right? Well, it's like a technical assessment, but some of them will do presentations as part of the interview
yeah,
process. Some of them will have like an assessment on site
mhm.
combined with in-person interviews. So just remember that whatever you believe is important for you internally, also think about from the candidate experience just to make sure that it's a good experience for them as well, right?
Right.
So there's like don't do too few, don't do just one and then hire because then
Yeah.
there's the whole, like, psychology of it where they think it's, like, it's too easy. It's like, oh, they don't value it enough versus if they have to go through a multi-step process, beat out all these other people, and then they're chosen, they feel more special, right? So there's a little bit of that, but then sometimes there's you can go too far and have too many rounds, call them
I've
back
seen
too
people
many
take
times.
themselves out of the running. That's the
Yeah,
thing. You wanna hit that sweet spot. There's people that you wanna see who's gonna stay in stay in the long run and, like,
yeah.
really get through those multiple interviews. But then if you do too many, I've seen people that are just like, "You know what?" And people start to get hostile about they're like, because when we're liaisons, sometimes as recruiters, we get to hear, like, the candidate side of it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they're like, "This is ridiculous, man. How many like, I've already met they wanna meet me again, the same person?
yeah.
What? Was there something they didn't like about me the first time?" Like, people start to get, like, offended, kind of like, "What did I not
Well,
present to them before?"
yeah. Well, and then some of it is it's a reflection on you as the company, right? So then they're like, dude, if this is how you just do a simple interview, how are you gonna, handle like when an actual problem arises inside, or if we have to make a decision internally? It's too,
Right.
they can already
Are you
they
gonna
can
have a
already
bunch
get a
of red tape?
sense.
Yeah.
Exactly. They already get a feel for how bureaucratic it's going to be or how slow the
Right.
process is going to be. If I want to implement a new system or do a simple process change maybe, right? A process improvement, right? Like how many chains up do I have to go up just to get a simple decision
Yeah.
made, right? So I've had a this is a story. So I've had a candidate that we were representing for one of our clients, and they did the same number of interviews as this other company, right? So same number of rounds, same number of people. However, instead of spreading it out over 3 weeks like this other company did, our client did it in 2 weeks, right? So first round, and then they met a couple people, and then they did a second round, and then they met a couple people, and then right after that, they're like, "You're our
Make
guy.
a
We made
decision.
it."
Yeah.
Exactly. So the entire process was like 2.5 weeks, right? Super fast. And while that was happening, he had started over here with this company first, but
Mhm.
they still hadn't made the final decision by the time our client already went
Made an
through and
offer.
exactly. So then they finally came back and they made him an offer too, but he's like, "You know what? Just that whole process compared to this process, and then they made me feel, like, wanted, and
Mhm.
they're just so much more efficient," so it just it gave him a sense of, like, I feel like this is gonna be a much better f they call it much better fit, but
Right.
it's because of how they handled the whole process and how they made him feel,
I
right?
mean, that's a good takeaway, Yang, because I think that's a good point. Is that you don't realize that people are probably interviewing, especially if you have a really good candidate. They're
Mhm.
not going to be on the market long. Some of them are passive, meaning they aren't on the market at all. We're enticing them away from a company to begin with. So you're lying to yourself if you think you're the only company they're interviewing at, right?
Yeah.
And then you might have a really big missed opportunity because even if you think, well, we can beat that other company's up, because we always ask in interviews too. Always. I always say, do you have anything else going on? Are you interviewing? I think this is key to know where you stand. As this is as the manager interviewing. Some of those closing questions that I ask, usually like that whole wrap up, like, I mean, candidates will ask, so what are the next steps? But really, they shouldn't have to ask that. You should be putting that out there anyway, as the interviewer. But I would also, what else do you have? Are you interviewing anywhere else? Where are you at in that process? Because that shows you where you stand. But then even with that information, managers can get a little bit of ego and be like, "Oh, I'm not that worried about it. We'll beat the offer anyway." But sometimes it's
Yeah.
not about the money. Like you said,
Yeah.
it's not
So
about the total compensation.
my
It's
guy,
about the experience.
the other company offered more money, and he's like, "No." Yeah,
Yep.
he didn't even care. 'Cause especially when you get up to the senior level, like, if it's a $50,000 candidate, a $5,000 increase, offer, it's a lot of money, it's 10%,
Right.
right?
You're like probably going to take the job that offers you more
Yeah,
money.
but if it's a $100,000 candidate, an extra 5,000 is minimal, right? And then once
Right.
you get up to, like, the 150, 200 plus, an extra, 5, 10, 15K, like, they care more about like the work environment, their
Mhm.
impact, like the peers that they're going to be. There's other things that are more valuable to them than just money, right?
Yeah.
So that play that you're talking about, like, oh yeah, I'll beat the other out, no, it doesn't work.
Well, and then the other thing is honor your commitments. So when I say that, like if they ask that next step question and you say, "Oh, well, our process is then so anybody who we move on, they'll meet with so and so, and you should be hearing back from us in the next couple of days, on our decision either way." All those things. You know how many candidates get really upset because they feel misled or misguided on that?
Yeah,
I know people, and this is a mistake that a lot of companies make, and you wouldn't think that, like, professionally people would do this, but they do it because people get busy. I know people who went and interviewed at companies and never heard back.
yeah, they get
Like never.
ghosted.
It's great, but I can understand that as an applicant, right? If I have
Mm,
500 applicants, unless I have an automated system set up to like respond to everybody as I move them out of through stages, then there's no way I can get back to 500 people. So
yeah,
sometimes they just didn't hear a back and like about their application. I think you should still probably always have a response to people regardless. But if at bare minimum, even if you can't get back to every applicant, if somebody was selected and came into your company and interviewed with you, you owe them some kind of response and in a timely manner,
yeah,
right? You should be following up. And if it's not you, someone should. If it's your admin, if it's recruiting, if it's whatever, somebody needs to respond to them and say, sorry. Or if there's delay for some reason, let the candidate know that so they're not sweating it out, thinking, oh, well, I'm just out of the running. Right.
yeah,
I think communication is key, timeliness is key, and just and then once you make that selection, once you've chosen your candidate, I would say, because look at your situation, the story you just said where the guy took himself out. Well, now they're back at square one. Now they're back at backup candidate.
hmm
Well, if they didn't get back to that candidate, didn't give him anything, he's going to probably be like, nope, too.
yeah. It's all about
So
candidate experience,
yeah.
right? And so kind of along those lines, when you're so this part of the candidate experience, but also like pitfalls, right? So like
Yeah.
potential landmines, right? Like things
Mhm.
that so you shouldn't do, right? Are there other recommendations that you give to your clients on how to conduct the interviews? So two parts. So as you're conducting interviews, like things that you should not say, right?
Yeah.
And then also when you are following up and you're closing the loop on why they did not get the job, things that it's okay to say versus you
Yeah.
shouldn't say too much info. You don't
Right.
want to give too much, because it potentially you could get yourself in trouble. So,
Right.
so give us some guidance or advice on that you give to your
So
clients.
I'll answer it in two parts, and the first part being the first part being the it during the interview, right?
Yeah.
So during the interview, we've talked about this on some others sessions, but to revisit it for the series, right? I would say that you definitely don't want to ask legal pitfall questions. So that is things like a anything in that Title VII, I call it, right? Age, race, whatever. But people can step into that without knowing, right? They can ask a question that just comes off as discriminatory without even ever meaning to be. So I see this a lot. These are common ones. One is, where do you live? Right? Because they're trying to gauge like commutes and things. Like you're trying to find out like how far somebody has to drive. And,
Yeah.
you're not
Well,
asking the question.
especially in Houston,
Right.
where it's huge, right?
Right. I mean, because if I'm interviewing somebody, and listeners, if you don't know where these locations are, I get it. But Woodlands and League City
Yeah.
would take you 2 hours to drive that drive. So
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
even, I mean, I wouldn't even apply for a job, but people
Yeah.
do. People apply for jobs that are way far because they're like, but some people also are like, I'll move. I'll move to where the job, there's two schools of thought. Some candidates are like, I want to work where I live. I only want my commute to be, I'm one of those. I'm like, I want my commute to be short, because
Yeah.
I've commuted for years.
Yeah.
But then there's other people who are like, no, I'll take the really great job and I'll just move, especially if their life situation warrants that they can, they're not rooted somewhere. But as the interviewer, if you ask that question, whatever their response is, there could be bias created
Hmm.
because you'd be like, I knew somebody that lived there once. Yikes. I know how those
Yeah.
people are. I mean, have y'all seen, they have them like the memes and stuff on Instagram that's like, this is totally Heights. If I was a mom in the Heights, this is what I would wear.
Yeah.
This is where I would shop. This is where I'd eat. If I was mom in Memorial, whatever, right? It's the same bias you're going to create like with a candidate, like if you ask where they live.
Yeah. The other thing that interviewers do is they put themselves in the candidate's shoes. So they're like, if I lived in the Woodlands, I would never drive to League City. Right? So
Right.
then they automatically assume that this candidate would not do the same. So then they automatically remove them from selection. But the thing
Right.
is you don't know what that candidate's thinking, right? Some
Mhm.
people don't mind the commute. Some people are like, I actually like an hour commute because I have small kids and I that hour gives me an hour of just downtime
To
before all
tune
hell breaks
out or
loose.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, just my house is chaos, or I enjoy listening to a podcast or a good
Right.
audiobook in the car. And so I don't mind the hour commute, right?
Right.
I personally wouldn't drive from the Woodlands
I
to
know.
League City either. However, like I know some people that drive in from Brookshire all the way to Med Center. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like it's crazy, but they do
Fulshire,
it.
everybody's like moving to Fulshire, and I'm always like, are you sure you want to do that? I mean, I know you got space out
Yeah,
there.
well,
Like
because they
they're like, oh, I'm doing a mini acreage, right? Like I have 2 acres in Fulshire.
yeah.
Then I'm like, yeah, but now you're commuting like twice as long. Or do you really want to do
Yeah,
that?
but for some people, like, to them, it's fine, they don't care. They're like, I have my land, I have my big house, whatever, out in the country, and then but I still value my career, and then, like, med centers, Houston Med Center is, like, awesome and huge, right? They're like, "That's where the best opportunities are for my field, so that's what I'm gonna do for my career, and I don't mind it's not ideal, but it's not that bad, right? Whereas the interviewer might be like, no way, that's too far, the worst the furthest I'd go is maybe, I don't know, Memorial or something, right?
Right.
And that's way past, right? So they automatically
There's ways to ask. So there's ways to kind of gauge one, like, distance, but also like what somebody's situation is without directly asking about kids or locations or whatever. You can simply ask somebody, these are the parameters, right? Like, we usually start work around in this department. We're a little flexible. Like, I mean, yeah, the company kind of generally it's 8 o'clock, but I'm pretty flexible. Like, we always get kind of really started around 8:30. Is there anything that would, prevent you from, like, being able to get here at 8:30 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever it is, right? You
yeah,
lay it out for
exactly.
them and then you let them. I mean, sometimes you'll get a simple no to that answer, but most time you're not. Most of the time people are going to give you more. They're going to say, "Oh no, I mean, they'll start telling you without you
Mhm.
asking.
Yeah.
I live in Katy, so I mapped it. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I mapped it. I've already, like, seen how long, again, and that's good. That's positive because you know that they are already, like, considering that.
Yeah,
So they're like,
yeah,
"Oh, I mapped it from here to it's like 35 minutes." No, it's fine. I mean, my kids, they'll start telling you all kinds of things, right?
yeah.
My kids school starts at 8:15, and so if I drop them at, then and it's this many minutes to here, yeah, no problem,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I had a guy, he has 4 kids. His oldest is, 11, right? And he's got yeah, 11 all the way is down to like a 3-year-old or 4-year-old or something, right? So he's busy. His life is, and then his wife and they switch off on who drops off, who picks up, right?
Right.
So his thing is like, yeah, I can work any schedule. I'll work from home as well if it's busy. So but I have to just be off at 4 p.m. or whatever it was to pick up my kids, right?
Yeah.
So that's my only. Or actually, no, no, no. He was the one that drops off in the morning. So he's like, so I can't start my day until 9 a.m. Right? But I
But
don't
he's like, "But
mind.
I can stay till whenever." Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't come before 9 a.m. So as long as they're okay with that, everything, you know what I mean? So he
Yeah.
will bring it up. He's like, "Hey, everything's great, but this is my situation. This is
Right.
my only ask. I have no problem with this." So yeah, as you were saying, the candidates will sometimes open up and they'll reveal what their
But I think
situation.
it's good to find those things out for the manager, for the company, to find those things out on the front end because
Yeah.
then there are no surprises.
Yep.
If all that comes out in the interview, you already know and you're flexible, that shows the candidate that it's a good place to work and they care about family and all those other things, right? But then also, if none of that does get parsed out and then you had it in your head that the person was going to start at 8:30 and they're showing up at 9 o'clock and there had never been that discussion, you're like, what's up with this guy? Why is he 30 minutes late every day? And then maybe you have that follow-up discussion and now they're telling you, well, because my kids and 9 o'clock's a better start time for me. It kind of puts them already on a back foot though, because you're like, well, I wish you would have told me that.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
but the thing is like, yeah, so what Ashley was saying is you can't directly ask that. However, you can set the expectation and then ask them if there's anything that'll get in the way of meeting that expectation. Right.
right.
So there's ways that you can ask that question without asking that question, essentially, is what Ashley's saying there.
Okay, so part 2 is around, we've selected the candidate. Now you have to go back and have the conversations with the candidates you didn't select, right?
Yep.
So you want to be careful. So just as it's important as it is to be careful during the interview about not, about, again, consistently asking questions, not asking certain, not stepping into landmines. Um, those kind of things can get you into hot water in terms of unfair hiring practices, if you will. But you also have to be very careful about selection decisions. I always tell people too, like, a lot of applicant tracking systems are built to where you can select like the reasons why you didn't select someone.
Mm-hmm.
I hate those because
Why?
I'm like, be very careful, right? I think in the application process, it's very easy to be like, did not meet minimum qualifications, especially if they didn't. That's
Yeah.
easy. You didn't meet the qualifications to even be interviewed. Boop, you're out, right? But in the interview process, now it's come down to really more about you could have a candidate apples to apples, same number of years experience, same industry. Like, I mean, they're so neck and neck. You're like, how do I just really liked this person better, right? They were
Hmm.
just like, we just clicked better. But you can't say that when you put in the selection drop downs, because just better fit is one of them that I don't like, because that can be scrutinized in the court of law. If you were ever to be deposed and they're like, well, okay, you said that this person was a better fit. Is it because they were white? Is it because they were whatever, right? So
Yeah,
it can be
yeah.
scrutinized. So you just have to be very careful. I would say that that's first and foremost, is like when you're putting the reason for selection, just, be not super detailed. You don't really have to put that in writing anywhere. Your
Well, what do
selection
you
would.
do? What do you do if a candidate's asking? It's like, hey,
Oh,
I
right.
was real.
And that's what I'm getting to. So the
Yeah.
part one is that, generally you have to make that selection based on something. That's why I really like those metrics around scoring,
Mm,
right? Because if, let's say, candidate one scored fives in every one of those buckets and candidate B scored like fours and fives, well, they just scored higher. And it wasn't even about anything, we just all scored them better in communication. So they beat out candidate B in communication, you know,
yeah.
but it has nothing to do with them as a person. It's about the
So
things you were looking for.
the feedback would you give? What would you tell the candidate then?
So I still don't know. I get very stuck on this too, right? Because again, we're people, and you want it to be personable, and we care and all those things, like, but we also have to protect ourselves. So I would want to tell candidate B, well, you just, we felt like, you know, the person we went with just had a little bit better communication. What do we mean by that? Give them an example. They A good candidate is going to take that as positive feedback of like, okay, that's where I went wrong in the interview. That's what I could have done better. Or maybe I could have answered that question better, and it would have given them a better idea of how I was a communicator. On the flip side of that, somebody could be like, was it my accent? Was it my whatever, So you have to be
Yeah.
careful. I usually don't give, again, I try to stay a little bit vague, and I just say, when I follow up with them, I just say, we've decided to go a different direction. Especially if it's a runner up candidate, I'll tell them,
Yep.
it was really tough decision. I mean, all of us really liked you. We thought you were a great candidate. We're going to keep your resume on file. And when we expand or we have another opportunity, like, you're our first call,
Yep.
you know, because, and as that should be the procedure anyway, like, because there was nothing really bad about that
Hmm.
candidate. They
Yep.
just weren't your top one, right? They weren't the one. But if they start to ask follow-up questions to that, like, well, why? Or was there something I could have done differently or whatever, you know? In that case, I just tell them, hey, we, you're gonna land somewhere. You're great. It just wasn't, we just had a candidate that, just did a little bit better than you did or whatever. And then they will ask, well, what did I not do? Like, it can go down a really difficult, like, rabbit hole, if you
Yeah.
will. But sometimes, just like in any other case with employees or exit interviews or any kind of thing, when I coach people, sometimes you just have to close the loop. You just
Yeah.
have to say, hey, look, I mean, that's all I can really share with you right now, but good luck in your future endeavors. We wish you the best.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. 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 I had a candidate like that where he had an accent as well, and then he was a runner up, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and then they went with another candidate because they just felt she was a better fit, you know?
Right.
So then best I could tell him was just, yeah, there was nothing really wrong that you
That you
did. There was
did.
nothing,
Yeah.
yeah, they just liked the other candidate a little bit better. That's it, you know? And
Yeah. I just try to keep my responses vague to that.
yeah, yeah,
And likelihood is that it probably had nothing to do with their accent. It's
yeah,
just, but you just never want to be like scrutinized later.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that was how the
Exactly.
decision. That's why
Yeah.
having structured interviews is so important.
Yeah. 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 So then I have one more question. So, well, just to kind of wrap up. So two questions real quick. So when a manager just says, I just feel good about this candidate.
Yeah. If they call it the gut feeling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you advise that person? And then my second question's around hiring, like, personality or potential over just pure just skills and experience.
Okay. So on the first thing about gut is we all have it. We all have a gut feeling. Well, especially people who have been managers or in our line of work for so long, you really can get a good read on somebody in the first like 5 minutes of an interview. Like we can. We
Mhm.
watch body language, we watch how they respond, we're listening carefully. Like we're a good read on judge on character. It just comes with the territory. But I would say like having a good feeling about somebody versus
I can't
I
hear it.
usually
You're good.
challenge that with the manager to say, "What did you feel? Where did that good feeling come from? Elaborate for me." Or if they said, "I just didn't get the right vibe from that. What do you mean by that?" I get them to elaborate, right? And then I break it down and I say, "Okay, if that's the only thing, that one thing they said or that one body movement, eye twitch or whatever the heck it is, right? I'm like, pretend you didn't see that. Pretend that wasn't feeling wasn't there, right? Then what? So I think that's why structured interviewing is so important. I know I've said it a bunch of times today, but like, because then you can't point to a feeling. Everybody has their score based on the answers that were exactly the same to every candidate, and the scoring is how it lands.
Yeah.
And you'll
And
still have that manager that argues. So the scoring comes out and this candidate they really like scored lower and now the decision's being made by the scoring and they're like, "Well, I just liked her better."
yeah.
You're like, "So? Well, we didn't. So we're moving
So,
on."
so that reminds me of like, like the dance shows and stuff where they have like the judges scoring and
Yeah,
whoever has the high
they
score,
hold up the
even though,
number.
and then a judge is like angry because they're like, no way, that one was way better. It's all based off of feeling, but
Yeah.
you measure based off of core metrics,
Well, yeah.
KPIs,
So
right?
in Dancing with the Stars, they're doing it off of feeling probably. In the Olympics, they're doing it off of very technical scores that are
Yeah.
within like a point whatever of each other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So the only warning that I tell people with the feeling is just understanding that you have bias, right?
yeah,
So you're gonna feel naturally better for another candidate that looks like you, talks like you, acts like you, right? But if you understand that you have bias and that could sway how you like how closely you listen to your feeling. Like always trust your gut, right? Because
right.
some if you have a
That
bad
doesn't
feeling,
mean they're as technically good,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like they can have all the things around like communication and personality and all that, but like technically not be as strong because because your bias came in, you didn't ask those technical, you didn't drill down enough,
yeah.
you
So
know?
so so what I tell people is like, yeah, still trust your gut, obviously, and that's important. But at the same time, follow the metrics, follow the guidelines, follow the interview guide, just to make sure that you're doing both parts, right? And then hopefully you
Right.
end up with the best candidate. Okay, so here's my last thing about hiring. How do you feel about hiring for potential and personality versus like past experience and just good resume skills? Or skills on the
So I
resume,
would
I should say,
say,
yeah.
yeah. So I would say that if you have someone that go back to that scenario of you have like a level playing field, right? Like on the technical and you did the grid based interviewing and like, so technically and experience and all that, they kind of level out. And now you're making the decision based on those other intangible elements, right? I would say that, in this, I mean, this has no legal bearing or anything, what I'm about to say. And again, I'm not a substitute for legal advice either,
Yeah.
but I would say that you have to remember that work is like your second. It's a set. We are there. If you think about the number of hours in a week, and you're there 40 plus sometimes, and you take out sleeping in there, we're probably at work more than we're with our own families.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that the personality and the like cultural aspects be there, because these are people you have to work in, day out. So if you just feel like, you connected better with one candidate versus the other, but they had comparable skill set, go with the candidate that you feel is going to fit your culture, you
Yeah.
know? But also don't forget that the technical person, it also depends on the role and which department. I mean, sales versus, some are client facing. There's different things you're looking for, right? But I would say that technical minded person who might not have been as bubbly and had the personality in the interview, some of those things though, if you're a good company, solid company that cares about employees, you can find ways to coach those things up.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, invest in your employees is what I would say. Send them to trainings, give them opportunities to get better at communicating. I went and did an effective communication training for one of my clients. They asked for it because they were having some internal, people just not really, departments that didn't really understand the other department, lots of finger pointing, things like that. And so they were like, there's like a disconnect here, help us. So I did an effective communication training with them. And really what a big part of what they learned is about you know, perception versus reality, and personality differences and things of that nature. So, it really is, if somebody comes in, you only get a very small snapshot in an interview to understand a person. It doesn't mean that that's exactly who they are. And it also doesn't mean they can't be coached.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you
So
technically liked someone better, don't pass over them just because they might be a little bit drier or not exactly like you, you
yeah,
know?
or greener, or don't have the right software, or just
Right.
they don't have to be a 10 out of 10, right? They could be a
Remember,
solid.
some things can be taught and some things can't. That's the way I
Yeah.
look at
So what I say is skills can be taught, but personality and intelligence, that you can't. You can't
it. It's innate.
yeah, that's a little bit hard. Like work ethic, those aren't things that you can teach. Like work ethic, you can't really teach right away. Personality, they are who they are. Intelligence, obviously, those are like intangibles, characteristics that you can't teach. Work
Well, like
ethic, you
me, I'm late to everything. I just am. I cannot be on time. It is just like who I am.
yeah, it's a true story. We start every podcast behind schedule.
Not always, yeah. But I'm
Yeah.
late to everything, right? But I'm very clear about that with people. And I also then I try to I like have to trick myself into like, okay, the podcast starts at 2:30. Let me pretend like I just always tell my friends already know, like they just tell me like a 15-minute difference.
Yeah,
Like if the
yeah,
dinner
yeah.
reservation's 7:30, they tell me 7:15 and then I'm there at 7:30.
Yeah, yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? But I know for like business meetings, you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
So I intentionally on my calendar put meetings earlier than they really are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like I
That's
move
funny.
because, but, but people just, and as I get to know people and I've worked with people long enough, like they just kind of know that about me and they just like are like, whatever, because they know that once I'm there, I'm present, I'm engaged and I work hard and
Yeah,
I deliver. So they're like, whatever, she's 5 minutes late. Like she does a good job. So fine. But
yeah,
so that's the same thing, right? Is I can't, that's kind of just innate in me. I don't know if it's like an internal clock thing. I can't fix it. I've tried. I don't know. But it doesn't make me a bad person, bad employee, incapable of delivering, so
yeah,
just
yeah,
again, remember that about people. Like just because there's one little thing that might be sort of off or whatever, like doesn't mean again, that's why I hate when managers get set. We can get into this in the manager training session, but when people are late and they're like, well, she's like 8 minutes late every day. I'm like,
yeah.
you're
Well,
gonna write
it's
the
it's
for that? Like,
it's the person's core belief system, right? So then for some people, being late is a sign of disrespect,
yeah.
It's like Oh, it means they don't respect
There's a
me. It means
cultural thing there too. Like if I
eh,
went to like Asia and I wouldn't be late because I'd be like, oh God, I'm gonna offend everybody in the country. Like,
I don't know. There's a thing called Asian time where they're
no,
like always late. Yeah, I
yeah,
have I have a friend that I do the same thing. I tell her 30 minutes ahead, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's funny, but yeah, so the thing that I coach clients, my clients is like, hey, just remember like skills you can always teach. If they're smart, they'll pick it up quick, right? There's a little
yeah,
ramp up time in the beginning, but the payoffs it would be so much bigger if you hire a more high potential person, you know,
yeah.
somebody with a very strong work ethic, great personality, high potential, intelligent, right? Those are innate characteristics that you can't really teach, you know,
Mm.
software skills, how to do, you know, certain technical
Pivot
things on the
tables in
job.
Excel. I hate that
Y-
question too when people are like,
Yeah.
how strong are you in Excel? I'm like, kinda. I can use it. I'm like, but I can learn it.
Yeah.
Well,
And the same
especially
thing.
now with like Chat GPT and all that stuff, like
Yeah.
you don't really even who cares. But but still, I will figure it out. I am a figure it out, fake
Yeah.
it till I make it if
Actually,
I
that
have
is the
to.
number one skill to hire for. Somebody that has that figure it out mentality, I can figure it out mentality. If you can find somebody that has that, that one just that's their identity and they truly believe that, that's a skill, that's the type of person that you want on your team.
Yeah.
Because
Where
especially as
where there's a will, there's a way. Like
well,
that's,
because especially with AI now, like, dude, you can figure out anything. Like, I'm teaching myself all sorts of like programming stuff, and I'm not a programmer, right?
yeah.
But I'm working with AI right now, and I'm having it like I'm building all these things, right?
Yeah.
But that's because same thing. Like, I have that I'll figure it out mentality, you know?
Well,
Um,
that and when you're a small business owner, you just don't want to spend money.
well, yeah, that too.
I'm always like, I don't want to outsource this or pay somebody.
Yeah. Eventually, we'll get there where I'll just throw money at the problem,
Yeah,
but yeah,
correct.
but when I do, I'm gonna hire somebody that has that
I
I can
can
figure
figure it
it
out.
out mentality. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, alright.
Well,
Well,
this has been a long session. There's probably more that we didn't even cover, but it's a really good topic because I am a true believer in everything around that employee life cycle that we've been talking about in this series starts with hiring.
yeah. Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
I mean, it's to bring the best possible person in the door and you will limit so much potential exposure and problems and
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Or the right person can save you a ton of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've talked to a couple people this week that I've interviewed some candidates where like one candidate saved her in the 3 years that she was at her company, saved them $9 million.
That's crazy.
Like
That's
just
that's a good
for,
ROI.
yeah, I was like, oh my
Yes.
God, that's
More than
huge.
paid for herself in full.
Yeah.
Right.
It's insane. Yeah.
Well, and then the sad part is she's looking for another job, so there's something there. But that also means that that company should be like, "Man, she saved us $9 million. How do we keep her?"
Well, she ended up
And
getting
that
laid off because
oh, layoff.
she improved her department to the point where they didn't need her anymore, and
Well,
then
that's why I went into consulting because if you make something efficient enough, they don't need you anymore. But in my case, I'm okay with it. Like
yeah,
I work to the next job, but like when you're in a company doing that, it's scary. You're like, should I
yeah,
just sit back and pretend like I don't really know, or just go really slow on this project? Like, it is a real concern, you
yeah,
know, because you're like, there is that expression of work myself out of a job. Yeah. So
yeah. Well, yeah, that could be a whole nother episode.
yeah,
Um,
we'll write that one down for future content.
yeah.
But
All
yeah,
right.
so anyway, coming up next week, we're going to continue our series and get into some more stuff around that employee life cycle and talk to you guys about what happens when they're an employee, what happens after you've selected them and now they're, yours and they're working in the company.
Yeah. So we'll talk more in depth about what Ashley hinted earlier about train them, develop them, help them grow into future leaders in your company so that you get the most out of them and get the most out of you with that experience
They
and they
feel
develop.
valued and they
Exactly.
develop. Mhm.
Exactly. Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks, Ashley. We'll see
All
you
right.
next
Thanks,
week.
listeners. Bye.
Bye.